Welcome back to the SEO Weekly, where queries are weird, advice is controversial, and everything depends. I'm your host, Garrett Sussman of the iPullrank agency, and holy moly, data geeks, agencies, SEO SaaS tools everywhere rejoice. Google's put out the Google Search Console URL inspection API. We've got this deep question of should you be a generalist or a specialist when it comes to SEO, and it's the big crossover event you've been waiting for, SEO meets Wordle. Let's dive in. So this week, SEO developers everywhere were a flutter, their butterfly wings were flapping because Google released the Search Console URL inspection API. Why is this important? Well, now you can actually ping the API to get a whole bunch of valuable data points, including, whether or not certain URLs are indexed, whether the canonical is being Google selected or user declared, whether or not rich snippets have been validated. Super useful for any sort of developer who builds plugins, does any sort of reporting, is building SaaS tools. And so there are some stipulations to pay attention to. So first off, 2,000 queries per day, 600 per minute. It is by property. So if you have a domain on a bunch of different properties in your account, then that kind of removes some restrictions there. At first, people didn't realize that was the case, but there are limitations of capacity to hit up that API. Now, the community went nuts, started building things right away, like right out of the gate on Twitter. Tobias Willmann put out a little tweet with some code showing how to use the new URL inspection API of Google Search Console with Python. Now, Chouinard took that to the next level. He built out a whole beautiful blog post step by step on how you can use Python to, really ping that, build your tool, hit up the API, each of the steps using like Google Cloud Platform, getting into, your console to write the code for that. So awesome article. Touches base on like what it is, how to get access to it, and then making an API call. And that wasn't it. I mean, then you had Luis Hernando, who in essence did a similar kind of tutorial, but he did it using Node.js. So if you prefer Python, if you prefer Node, you can either use JC or Jose's tutorials and dive in and start creating some really, really cool stuff. Meanwhile, a couple of tools actually started integrating and building it right away, and I'm sure there have been 20 more by the time this SEO Weekly comes out, but of course the champion, Screaming Frog, produced their version hitting up the API, and so now using Screaming Frog, you can check your Google index status, check your mobile usability, check your AMP validation if people are still using AMP. Some still are. You check your rich results and validation there as well. And then Valentin actually did this kind of free Google bulk URL inspection tool, which allows you, they did all the work for you, but you put in the URLs and then it spits out a little CSV with a bunch of different data points, including, the inspected URL, the Google canonical, the user canonical, index crawl time, etc. So people be making stuff. I love our creator economy. It is very cool. That is a very cool API put out by Google. I'm sure we'll see new tools pop up all over the place. So this week, Barry Schwartz has been hearing that more and more people are actually starting to get penalized for bad content in Google Discover. They put out their guidelines about a year ago, and now we're starting to see people actually getting manual penalties for the content. Some of the violations that Barry's been seeing have been around misleading content, medical content, and manipulated media. You can see in the notes of this description like what those policies are and how you can avoid violating them, but those are very real, something to pay attention to. In the world of Twitter, there was a really cool Twitter thread by Emma Thompson. Emma asked all the SEO, she said, do you think it's better to be an all-rounder SEO or a specialist in a particular niche? What do you consider yourself? And Emma got some great answers. So some of the highlights that I was really interested by were, there is no better. I'm an SEO all-rounder who now naturally tends to pick up tech work. Though say there's a specific tech problem to diagnose or solve, I do think it's useful to have the content and links background as it helps open up other routes of inquiry. That's from Natalie Mott. Started off specialized. I only did Google penalties at first. Then, as I learned and got more clients, I added more offerings and hired. Now we are still specialized. We do mostly audits, but every day we expand our skill set a little more. And that's Dr. Marie Haynes. I think you should follow what's interesting to you and not worry too much about becoming an all-rounder. One of the cool things about SEO is that it can mean a lot of things. Sometimes it's content, other times it's technical, local. After a while, you'll realize you have many skills, but maybe gravitate towards one area. Then you kind of become an all-rounder with a specialty. I haven't figured out if I have a specialty yet. I just try to learn all the things I find interesting. That's from Crystal Ortiz. And then I'm an all-rounder. I love technical, but also love getting creative with link building, especially the idea formation. I think people should work where their strengths lay. My old in-house team was structured to suit this with tech people and PR people working together. Sunny Matharu. Now, I agree with all of them. I think there's something to be said for having a base knowledge. It's almost like that T-shaped marketer graph that you see from Buffer often in the marketing world, but like having general knowledge because content and tech SEO and, on-page and off-page link building, they're all related and they will all ultimately impact the results. And then, if you want to specialize, if you're more of like a dev tech heavy focus, then go tech SEO. If you love content, focus on page, or just be an all-rounder. But great question by Emma, and I love the answers there. So Ahrefs, hilarious. They put out a Twitter thread asking the community to tell us you're an SEO without telling us you're an SEO, which comes up so often because who understands SEO that's not an SEO? But they got some great answers. A few that caught my eye that I loved was Sarvesh Shrivastava said, "A day in my life looks like this. Guess my profession." And it's true, up and down and left and right. Andrew Shotland just solved a multi-million-dollar problem in 2 minutes by updating title tags. Shirag said, "I make invisible stuff visible," and that's on point. I mean, that's accurate. Noel Seta said, "It depends, and it will take time." It depends. It always depends. Shane Martin said, "I say this to my team every day. It's not our fault, but it's our problem." So little SEO humor, on the Twitter threads. So big Wordle crossover. If you don't play Wordle, I wouldn't be surprised. Some people hate it. It's very polarizing. It's a little word game, kind of a rebus. You guess 5 letters. Anyway, the big news was New York Times acquired the website and the game for just under 7 figures, around 7 figures, something ridiculous. And I had to laugh because there were some SEO takes. Kane Jamison just basically threw it out there. He said, Wordle acquired in the low 7 figures, or as their SEO team said, for $143 to $429 per current linking root domain, and we should be able to cover the cost with a few well-placed internal Wirecutter links. They have 64,000 backlinks. Dave does to the actual Wordle website. So there's an opportunity there. You add in, the product affiliate marketing, Wirecutters owned by New York Times, and there is a huge opportunity both for SEO as well as for, generating some commission affiliate marketing opportunities there. So, in good SEO fashion, we saw the links, and that's how that narrative is playing out. And Ryan Jones, isn't it interesting how, like, in our world, when people get on a roll and they start cranking out good content, it's just like bam, bam, bam. Ryan Jones, who I mentioned last week for his Ngram tool, quickly spun up a Searchdle. So search plus Wordle. It is Wordle basically using SEO words. Well done, Ryan, on WTF SEO. Well done. Well done, sir. Get out of here. On a more serious note, our own Mike King put out a thought piece on Polymathis, his own personal site, all around Hamlet Batista and some recent developments with some tools that were, so SaaS tools were starting to put out a feature set that used edge SEO in the sense of, in front of the user, changing the website and being able to test out different SEO, kind of A/B testing tactics. Hamlet, who passed away about a year ago, created RankSense, and he actually owned a variety of patents related to this technology. Now, those patents have expired. He doesn't own them, but it was kind of his intellectual property to begin with. Now, it's an ethical sort of dilemma, because businesses that use his ideas and his what was his intellectual property, don't technically legally owe him anything, but especially with the man having passed away and his family needing any support they can get, it's an opportunity to support them and just do the right thing. And so that's what Mike covered in his article. He said, when it comes to some of these search tools using, Hamlet's intellectual brilliance, he said, at best, we're talking about negligent theft of intellectual property. At worst, the all too common erasure of the contribution of a person of color by the dominant caste. Now, Hamlet was Dominican. He lived in Jersey. He has a wonderful family. So Mike came up with a few proposals on how this could be handled. He said 3 things we can do. 1, SEO software companies seeking to profit from Hamlet's uncredited and uncompensated intellectual labor should contribute to ensuring the financial security of Hamlet's family. 2, SEO software companies profiting from Hamlet's uncredited and uncompensated intellectual labor should donate annually to a scholarship fund in Hamlet's name. Or SEO software companies profiting from Hamlet's uncredited and uncompensated intellectual labor should credit him. Simple. Now, they don't have to do that. There's no legal obligation, but I think those are all things. I agree with Mike. I think they're things they should consider. I realize this is polarizing, but I just think it's the right thing to do. There is still a GoFundMe available that Lily Ray helped set up. You can find the links in the description if you do want to contribute to his family. But I think it's an important topic, and we shouldn't forget it, and there's opportunity to make it right. So if you're interested in getting involved, Mike has said that he's happy to work to set up a scholarship fund, or if you have other ideas, you can contact him directly, Mike at iPullrank.com, and get something going. Moving on, Lidia Infante put together a really great list of 29 newsletters that will make you a better SEO. Some cover SEO, some cover marketing, some cover PR. Some of the ones that she highlighted were, SEO FOMO by Aleda Solis, SEO for Lunch by Nick Leroy, the WTS newsletter, which is Arij and the whole team at Women in Tech SEO, SEO Notebook by Steve Toth, Moz Top 10, the iPullrank Rank Report, and wait, what's that? The rank report wasn't on Lydia's blog post? Okay, that's awkward. So she doesn't know about how awesome it is. Okay, well, I'll shoot her a DM, let her know how awesome it is. Okay, so don't disregard the rank report by iPullrank as a newsletter. Just pretend I didn't say anything. Awesome list from Lydia. She's just constantly cranking out just great content. Follow her on Twitter. Actually, every Thursday, she highlights all of the great women SEOs that are putting out amazing content. Just puts a nice thread together there every Thursday. I appreciate that. Lily Ray last week talked all about the winners from 2021, the US, when it comes to indexing and visibility. This week, she talked about the losers. Whenever there is a winner, someone is going to lose out. And some of the highlights that were really interesting is she noticed with top-level country code domains, so like Pinterest.ca, the country level of major brands actually saw a lot of visibility loss. For instance, Pinterest and Amazon got hit pretty hard. Losses for some product review sites like TechRadar, and that makes sense with the product review update asking for more, comprehensive, actually tried it type of content. For whatever reason, TechRadar wasn't hitting the mark. Travel comparison sites. So TripAdvisor took a massive hit. There's discussion about whether or not that has to do with like Google's interest in the travel industry, but we did see TripAdvisor drop. And then user-generated content sites like Quora and Urban Dictionary saw a hit. that is obviously a bummer. Try to figure out what happened there, but a great report from Lily via Systrix data. On the SEO Rant podcast by Morty Oberstein, he had Rejoice Ojaku, and they talked about bringing diversity to the SEO community. This is something that Rejoice and more people should be passionate about. Rejoice is, she talks about it constantly, and it's amazing just continuing to find ways to include people of color and women and diversity all in our industry. It's not something you can just like do once and forget. Like, it is Black History Month right now. That's not the only time that you should be thinking about including, Black talent at your job. So one of the big points that I love in this interview Rejoice brings up is putting money behind your initiatives, especially like at conferences, like inviting, diverse speakers and then paying them, not just having a bunch of white dudes like me giving speeches at these conferences. It sucks. And we should be doing better. And I love Rejoice, in this interview. Check it out. Morty does a great job. He's a strong advocate. So that was a great one on the SEO Rant. Éléonore Frère put up a great article on Moz all about leveraging synergies between SEO and other channels and integrated marketing approach. And so I don't think this gets talked enough in SEO. The idea that SEO is tied to advertising, is tied to PR and social and email. And there are ways to have these different channels work together, omni-channel, cross-channel, taking the time to understand what the different departments are doing. One that I love specifically that she called out at the beginning of the article was all about search engine advertising, like SEA, and ways that can work with SEO. A few that I thought were interesting that she mentioned were, achieving SERP domination. So having both the ads appear and your organic results. Some people might think you're like kind of cannibalizing yourself, but if you are owning and dominating that SERP, you are really giving yourself the best chance to generate as much traffic and conversions as possible. Using SEA to predict SEO. So looking at the data as you run these campaigns for certain keywords, and then using that information to inform the type of content you want to create. Using a landing page, for instance. Optimizing metadata, and this can go both ways. If you have a meta description that's performing really well for organic, try that out in your ads. And if something's performing really well in ads, try it out in organic. And then optimizing your bidding strategy and budget management. So basically, seeing if something is performing well and organically, using that to inform how you're going to budget for your ads. Great article. She covers all these different channels, all these tactical ideas. Awesome one by Éléonore. Check that out. So Natalie Mott started maybe a series, I don't know, but I hope she does. On LinkedIn, on her Pulse, she did a kind of native article all around annoying SEO encounters. And this specific first one was all about when you're not able to get Google Analytics access to work with a client. I think this happens more often than not, and it's understandable. It's important. It's accountable for being able to do good SEO work. And Natalie had a lot of great advice. She identified like why this happens sometimes, the reasons behind it, but how you can potentially handle it. And she said the solution to this problem is to be assertive and persistent in asking for what you want, and to build relationships with other people in the business who will help you reach your objective outside of your main point of contact, if necessary, appropriate. So really just being out there, making the ask, being persistent, and getting it until you are able to start the job. Now, she did provide some other ways that you could potentially do SEO work without Google Analytics, mainly Google Search Console access or even third-party tools. But honestly, Google Analytics gets into the business use cases more effectively than those other tools do. Like when you get Google Analytics access, you can actually see if there were goals set up that are tied to specific conversion events that are important to the business. You can't see that otherwise, or you can see that they haven't done anything. And maybe that's something that you can consult and help them out with. I hope Natalie does more of these articles. I thought this first one was a great start. So Brie Anderson, Search Engine Journal, put together 11 different types of SEO data visualizations to inspire reporting. Data visualization is so key. Not only is data beautiful, especially when it's visualized properly, but that's the great way to tell a story using data visualization. So, some of the ones that I loved were like this DataPime dashboard that she found, or the keywordsearch.co dashboard. There are a whole lot of varieties there. There are a lot of great templates out there that you can use as well. Do you have any favorite data visualization for SEO templates or reports that you use? Share. We'd love to see them. Share that with us. But great work, Brie, kind of curating that on Search Engine Journal. Tori Gray of the Gray Dot Company put out a really great deep dive for e-commerce SEO, specifically technical SEO frameworks. She went into like common issues that you'll see across e-commerce, like issues that are unique to e-commerce SEO. So for instance, she tackled faceted navigation challenges that can be really hard when you have a whole bunch of products and a whole bunch of different URLs popping up based on your faceted navigation. Stock challenges, so handling for like rotating or out of stock products and how you should handle that from an SEO perspective. Categorization challenges, and then also seasonality, sales and promotion challenges. E-commerce can run into a lot of unique situations with, thousands and thousands of products and variations. Site architecture can be a major issue. Tori had this great kind of article with what they are and how to start to work through them. My man, Patrick Stocks, who likes his steak, well done, rare, I don't know. Patrick, we didn't talk about how you actually like your steak when you're on the podcast, but he did a really cool Core Web Vitals study where, he looked at, 5.2 million pages, looked at the crux data, which is, from Chrome, how the Core Vitals are producing across a bunch of different websites, and wanted to set some benchmarks via Ahrefs. What he found was enlightening. I mean, we haven't made a ton of progress with hitting the Core Web Vital thresholds for most websites. At this point, he found that the Chrome User Experience Report, the crux, which is the source of the Core Web Vitals data, 33% of people, or 33% of sites are passing that they saw. 33%. Maybe that's why they haven't rolled out the mobile-only indexing at this point. They were hoping to get it higher. It hasn't. It's still important because it is all about user experience. Obviously, Google has their own, other reasons for why they want the internet to speed up in terms of resources and finances, but Core Web Vitals has been, beating that drum for a while. In fact, from January of 21 to September of 2021, there's been a 10% improvement on devices. So both desktop and mobile have seen an improvement when it comes to Core Web Vitals. And remember, the page experience update is rolling out this month. We haven't heard any news yet, but you want to make sure that your Core Web Vitals are hitting those thresholds on desktop devices, because that could potentially be impacted once this update comes out, and they've said it's supposed to come out in February. The third aspect that I thought was interesting is Patrick found that while first input delay looks pretty good across the board, LCS and the CLS, the cumulative layout shift, and the largest contentful paint still has some work to do. There are some people in that red area, in that yellow area. So if that's something on your website that needs help, pay attention, improve it. Remove that technical debt, increase the speed, and get some greens. And then in the tools features, Phrase has actually a surprising amount of free tools. It helps you create a bunch of different content based on the best practice, or like the statistical expectations for a certain keyword across the internet. They actually have an outline generator, so you can see here what it looks like when you put in like the title and the description. It generates a nice little outline. Now, it's not as complex as the entire Phrase tool, the paid version, but for a free tool, thank you, Phrase, thank you. And then our own John Murch, tied to the GrepWords webinar that we did in December, did a second tutorial all about how to build your own keyword time activated peaks for using Sparkline. So yeah, we created the acronym, it's KTAPS, but the idea is looking at search volume like month over month by keyword it has a lot of value in terms of how you're approaching either seasonality or just looking at fluctuations in search volume and can impact your organic strategy. So now using grep words, you can create those keyword time activated peaks. How badass is that? That's jump merch. That's iPullrank jump merch. Check it out. That blog post is available. And then yesterday, I had Amanda Milligan of Stacker on Rankable. We talked all about how to create newsworthy content. She's been doing the content game for a hot minute. I worked at Fractal. She's been published in Moz and a ton of other great publications. We had a lot of fun talking about it. She's a D&D geek. Is that the appropriate? Is that like we own geek? I've never played D&D. I played Magic the Gathering with my nephew. So that's my extent of it. But she's cool as hell. It was a great interview. Definitely check that out. We're taking a break on Rankable next week, but the following week we're actually going to have John Murch. Come on, talk a little director of software engineering at iPullrank. What's that like? I'm still going to decide what the topic is. But that's it. It's been another busy week with a lot of great content. Super enjoyable. A lot of good stuff out there. As always, if you enjoyed the SEO Weekly, please subscribe. If you got this far, thank you. These things are long. They're like 20, 30 minutes, but there's so much to cover. If you like it, subscribe, leave a comment, share it, retweet it on the socials. I appreciate you listening, watching me each week. And if you have any questions, hit me up. I always love to chat, or find me on the Twitters. I think I prefer the Twitters. I'll send it on the LinkedIn, but I prefer the Twitters. Anyway, that's it for me. My name is Garrett Sussman of the iPullrank Agency, and I will catch you next week. You have a good weekend.